We're live, Joe. Hope you're ready. So we're here. We're getting we're going to get a little more professional here as we go along. But I can't promise that. We are here with a very special guest. I've been following this guy for a little while on mainly Twitter, but I've checked out some other things. He was on Rockfin too. He's done marketing, journalism, you name it. When it comes to me, it's the brain work of what this stuff is, right? Like you have a little more insight. Yeah, I think I explained it to you is that the way you put things is the way that I want to put things, but sometimes my brain gets in the way. I am joined by Joe Kania. I'm thinking I got that correct, right?
Kania.
I gotta give you something to yell at me for, right? But you have joined us graciously. I put it out there, and you're like, dude, just send me a message. Let's get this going. So I was like, yes, doing it. So Joe, you have been to places that I think a lot of us would have liked to have been. Flow wrestling, the Buccaneers, things like that. So you have a really kind of diverse sports background. It's not just wrestling. And that's why I wanted to have you on as well, because Vision Quest it's more than just I guess just a movie. It's kind of a state of mind, right? So I want to welcome you, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join me. So thank you very much.
Sure. I said I'm flattered anyone cares what I have to say at this point. And I was like, oh wow, sure. Yeah, I got a thing to do.
So the way we do this, like I told you in the beginning, we will start off by we're going to talk. It's all about you, but we're going to start from the beginning. We want to go back to the time that you remember sports in general. I don't care if it was croquet. I don't care if it was backgammon, whatever it is. What was the first sport that you remember visually in your head that you're like, yeah, oh man, I love playing this? What was the first sport you were in?
So the town that I'm from in New Jersey is a town called Westfield.
Okay.
So when my parents were in high school, Westfield had one of the best high school football teams in the country. And they also had really good wrestling program. Chris Campbell was wrestling for Westfield when my dad was in high school. Westfield's 1977 football team. It's the #1 public school football team in New Jersey history. Their offensive line averaged like 170 pounds. Both coached by the same guy. So this guy, Gary Keller, right? So for me, I was always this kind of next generation of people who grew up in that kind of Kaler era. And Westfield at that time was like Friday Night Lights for football. They had 35,000 people at their state championship game in 1977, which I think is still a record.
Yeah.
Very roundabout way to say football, right?
Yeah.
I was always a big kid, and I went out, and my parents were like, "You like football?" They sent me out, and I hated it. Man, did I hate it. I must have tried. I was a big kid, man. I was probably 100 pounds when I was in first grade, right? So,
wow.
And,
holy cow, Joe.
These guys, I know. Well, there was a point in time where I weighed almost 320 pounds in my life.
Man. How tall are you?
Yeah, 5'9".
Yeah, you're like me. You're like,
now imagine, right?
5'10".
But so these guys, when I started playing football, started practice run a mile with full pads on, 4 laps around the field. It was a mile. And I get like halfway through, I'm like, I don't think I can do this, man. And something that was always, if we have one viewer watching tonight, is my mom. She said, just gotta let me know when you're on, I'm gonna watch. But something that was always good for me is she said, sure, you can quit at the end of the year. You started it, you finish it through, and always, even maybe at the end of the year, I hated it. But by the time the season ended and you kind of settle, I think that wasn't that bad. Okay, I'll try again. Yeah. But football was always really my first love.
Okay. I believe is your mom's name Suzanne?
Yeah.
She says hi. Here, I'll show you. Hi.
Yeah. See, there we go.
That's awesome. Hi, Mom. It's awesome. So with that being said, with this, obviously football and the transition in I coach soccer right now, right? We know we have a lot of kids that are kind of, just starting out the year, school's just starting, that a lot of these kids didn't play sports all summer. So it's conditioning, right? So you kind of must have been one of those things where as you went through the season, it just got better because you were getting better. You were getting stronger and you were getting more conditioned and used to it. So I mean, we know the repetition, right? So when you started playing, how I guess how far into it were you like, I want to do something else and try a different sport? Was that your choice? Or were your parents like, well, hey, check out this sport, check out wrestling? Was that because you're over in the East Coast? I mean, it's heavy over there, right? I mean, wrestling is kind of the gig if it wasn't for football. I don't think basketball's big out there, is it?
No,
No.
wrestling. I always tell people I'm like wrestling in New Jersey is what they pretend like football in Florida or Texas is like. Like
Yeah.
it's big there, but wrestling in this part of, and as I think about it more, you say what's your first memory? My first thing is football, but I actually started wrestling before I played football.
Okay.
Say what's my like first? I'm like, oh, football. It's like, no, I actually because and it's funny, and we'll get into marketing stuff,
Yeah.
but I think I was in first grade, and they came around, and the teacher said, "Anyone want to sign up for sports? Here's wrestling and whatever else." Pass out little flyers,
Yeah.
and one of my buddies was like, "Oh, wrestling at WWE, sure." Oh, okay, I'll try that out. But when we talk about like how do we get kids into wrestling, for me, it was just they came and they passed out flyers. I brought it home, and I was like, "This sounds cool."
Yeah.
And I gave you my football story, my
Yep.
wrestling story. Again, I was a big kid. I didn't win a single match that first year. I wrestled an entire year, didn't win one match, got whooped by everyone.
That sounds
And
like my kid. Yeah.
well, it's when you're a big kid like that, they have age groups, but it's like first to fifth grade.
Yeah.
So like
Right.
I was getting beat up on by fifth grade kids when I was 6, 7 years old. So,
Yeah.
I'd love to say I was like, sports, yeah, this is awesome. I was like, I don't know, man, this might not be for me.
So did you ever get to the point? So, because like I said, I read that Rockfin article you'd put out. Did you get to a point then where you kind of decided, well, I like this better. I want to branch off and just do this. Were you a multi-sport kid? Were you trying to balance both? Or were you like, well, I'm only going to do this year and then I'm going to do football the next year? Or did you just, because they're different times of the year, right? So obviously practices aren't, but did you kind of divide them up or did you turn into a two sport kid?
So I was always three sports. So I went and I did football and then I wrestled. And yeah, that's funny. He says, remember the win, as do I. But I played baseball in the spring. And I remember there was some kid who ended up playing at Stanford and got drafted in the MLB, really tall, but a wild pitcher. I was
Yeah.
playing baseball in fourth or fifth grade. This dude hit me right on the side with a pitch. And I
Oh,
remember I just said, I was like, this isn't for me. And I turned around, I walked off the plate, and I was like, no
oh,
more.
really?
Yeah,
You made the
that was the
decision
end of
right
my,
there.
yeah,
That's
I was
awesome.
like, nope. But I played lacrosse in the spring, which, so as we say, like,
Wow.
what gets me, I know,
Yeah.
but you say, like, what kind of got me hooked? Well, that first year that I was playing football, our team went undefeated, and we were coached by guys who played for Kaler. So
Yeah.
these were like his players on these legendary teams. We go undefeated, and for going undefeated, we went and we played at the halftime show of a Giants Jets game one year.
Wow.
And I remember I was like little knees walking through the
Holy
thing and Michael
cow.
Strahan's like this and like so after that I was like, well, this is actually pretty cool.
That
Like
is pretty cool. Hell yeah, man. That's quite an experience. I mean, that's to me, that's the equivalent of a kid walking in the NCAA championships for a wrestling kid. I mean, and you get to walk down on the mats by where everybody's taking pictures and stuff, and there goes Bo Nickel, that kind of thing. Like, holy cow! But so your parent, I mean, you're pretty well rounded when it comes to sports. You weren't just I did this one and this one. I mean, you're talking about football, wrestling, and lacrosse and baseball, and so you're pretty well rounded. I did golf, I did soccer, I did wrestling, I did baseball. I only excelled at one, but I mean, I was trying everything too. So good on mom and dad for that one. That's pretty cool that they were able to keep you going, and it takes a lot, when a kid wants to do so much and the money and things like that. It costs a lot for pads and all that other stuff. But so when you kind of were going through, as you were, I would say, going through your middle school career, we'll call it, as you're kind of getting through middle school, what did you start branching off and individualizing, or did you try to go all the way through? Were you going through middle school and high school trying everything you could?
Well, so I I was notably bad at everything when I started, but
I'm not going there.
we're, we're blue collar family, right? So
Yeah.
like my dad was a stonemason. So over
uh
the summer, if you ever go and put a sidewalk in without a jackhammer, the way you do it is you take a pry, you put it
mhm,
up, and you smash it with a
correct.
sledgehammer.
Yep.
Pick the rocks up, throw it on the truck, go to the
Yep.
dump, throw it off.
Hmm.
My mom's dad owned a plastic manufacturing factory. So the job would be, it was funny, she's going to laugh, ripping papers.
Yeah.
We would literally sit there and rip huge stacks of paper
No
or
kidding.
moving huge drums of plastic pellets onto a pallet.
Yep.
So just through like these types of kind of, people say like farm boy strength, I got really strong because
Yeah.
I was doing these types of, so I go through and I kind of start picking up fifth, sixth grade, and I haven't grown since seventh grade. So I was pretty big at this point. But I played football, wrestling, lacrosse all the way through middle school. And coming into high school, I mean, I got second. I got a fun story for you.
Yeah.
So I was going into sixth or seventh grade. I was like, I don't even really know that I want to wrestle anymore. Right. And it's funny. She's like sitting there watching.
That's
I
awesome.
was
I
like,
love it. I love it.
I don't really know that I want to wrestle anymore. It's just kind of, I wasn't really that into it. And a buddy of mine, his kid Brandon Rolnick, if
Yep.
anyone, it probably might not, but he was number one in the country at a point in time. He's from Westfield, wrestled at Princeton, prep Bargo champ. He was a great wrestler.
Yeah.
His mom was like, "You want to wrestle for a schoolboy team?" And I'm like so flattered. I'm like, wow, Team New Jersey, that's so cool. We get these jackets and everything.
Yeah.
Little do I know, they don't even have a body at the weight. They just need anybody. So they come to me, and it's funny. Next time I see her, I got to remind her. At this point, seventh grade, I'm like 250. Like I was a big kid.
Damn,
And she
Joe.
was like, she was like, the weight class is 225 though. It's basically like you got to lose some weight, dude.
Yeah.
Because they didn't. 250 was a weight class for the schoolboy team.
Really.
225 was the next one. So I remember I went down to Lakewood. I bought my little uniform from Mr. and Mrs. Hahn down in Lakewood. I still got it sitting in my. Not only do I still have it, the jacket is sitting right there in the closet. It's not
No
even
way.
traded away.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's great.
So that's what kind of, so then we went out there and that was like the coolest thing ever. It's like, oh, we're in New Jersey. David Taylor was wrestling for Ohio and Logan Stieber back then. And
Yeah.
it was just like a really, really cool. And that's
Wow.
where I met Dave Bell, who was coach at Bergen Catholic. And people say like, oh, like recruiting Catholic school, recruiting. Like he was just like a really good dude. Like no one ever came and recruited me. He was just like a really good dude, and Bergen Catholic wasn't very good at the time.
Mhm.
So, after that schoolboy trip, I really kind of picked it up and got more into it. I was, second at Kid States, and I am still sour about that. I think I might have been such a narcissist that I had them print off the state champ on the back of the hoodie at the thing. So I was like, I'm going to win. Go print it off already. And I lost. And
Go print
20
that
years
off.
later, I know, just like
Uh,
little asshole. But So then that kind of, led me to Bergen Catholic,
Yeah.
where I played football and I was a better football player than I was wrestler, even at that point. So I went over to Bergen Catholic and football in the fall, wrestling in the winter, track and field, shot put, discus in the spring.
So it sounds like you kind of do the mix. It sounds like the wrestling helped your football, right? Like it would help to, I don't know, maybe help your
Definitely.
stance. I don't know if we know who Killer Hippie is here, but brutal.
He's a good dude. I
Yeah.
know.
But so as you're going along and you're getting, you go to Bergen Catholic, which now we know is definitely put some kids out, as far as I would say both sports in general. But when did you decide in your high school days that you wanted to that you were going to think about going to college to play sports? Was that ever a thought in your mind at all that I love this one so much, I want to do it in college? Did you ever have that moment?
What's funny about New Jersey, no one ever talked like that. No one said, I want to go to Iowa. No one, I never heard anyone talk, I want to be a state champ.
Okay.
Like the state championships in New Jersey are, I've been to the Super Bowl, I've been to world championships. There's no atmosphere like Boardwalk Hall for the state championships for wrestling.
Yeah.
So everyone, like all of my group, no one was ever like, I want to go to college and wrestle. They were like, I'm going to be a state champ.
Yeah.
And the kind of blue collar nature of New Jersey is a lot of these guys don't go wrestling. I mean, they do, it doesn't work, right? New Jersey's never been like PA in terms of college wrestlers.
Sure.
They're like dudes who go and they scrap and then they go be plumbers or electricians or
Yeah.
something. Go work for DPW.
Yep.
That's so it never really. I played football my freshman year, and then going into oh man, you're gonna have to put a clock on me because I'll keep going into tangents.
That's
But
why we're here.
so so I go. It was a strain on my family to be able to. Bergen Catholic was like 50 minutes away. There were
Oh,
times where like, yeah, they would like I'd get up at 5 in the morning and I'd go up there and I'd sleep outside the building and then go in and go to school and go to so I went there my freshman year and not like guilt, but like I appreciated the sacrifices people were making for me.
right.
And I
Right.
didn't start my freshman year, which in hindsight, it's like I was a freshman heavyweight, like for a team that was top 10 and not number one, top 10 team in the state.
Yeah.
But they had a big football player who was like 6'5", football player who was a junior. And he beat me in my wrestle off by 1 point every single time. So I said, all right, I'm going to spend this off season and I'm going to work like a dog this
Mm.
entire off season. And that's what I did. I'd go into school and I'd sleep outside before school. I'd go to school. I'd go to track and field practice. I'd go run. And then they had this place called Premier, which is now Apex.
Okay.
The original location that Premier had was nicer than the Olympic Training Center. It was an insane wrestling facility, ultimately fizzled out, and then they came back to being Apex. But I'd go over to Premier and I'd lift and I'd wrestle. I'd get home at 10 o'clock. So I come into my sophomore year. This kid's a senior. I'm like kind of feeling some internal heat. Like, people are putting themselves out for me to be here. Like,
Yeah.
and man, was I whooping that guy in practice. And I'll always remember Brian Cushing, who played obviously in the NFL for years, wanted to wrestle his senior year at Bergen. And Pete Carroll and USC said, we don't want you. Like, we want you to focus on football. Don't go waste your time.
Yeah.
So the day I was supposed to wrestle this kid off, who, was the incumbent starter, I already had my singlet on. Like I was ready to rock.
Mhm.
And he came in and he was like, well, my college tried to like pull a little bit of a Cushing. It's like, Mike, I'm going to play college football. They don't want me to the day 30 minutes before the wrestle off. So that was how
That's a good story.
I
That's a
would
good
have
story.
I would have relished the opportunity to actually get the wrestle off. Because then it's like, oh, you're just here. The other guy quit. You're not like the guy. It's
Right.
like I wanted, you're a competitor. Like I wanted that shot. So
Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, it sounds like that's how you've been. I mean, for the most part, once you got into sports, it seems like how it's been. I mean, for you, I mean, going to a school, number one, you were dedicated enough as a kid because you understood what people were doing for you, but you're sleeping outside of a school, right? Like because of the advantage or whatever it is, because you have the advantage of being able to go to a good school that your parents wanted to get you into. And I can attest to that. We moved Liam. I mean, we moved from Oshkosh to Kakana, and it wasn't necessarily educational, but I mean, just everything all around. Like the schools in Oshkosh are not even close to what Kakana is, and what the grading system that they have for schools. So we did the same thing. I mean, but we did what we needed to do to make sure that he was going to be successful. Now he's in sports as far as wrestling, and that's the only thing he's done. Like we tried, like I told you, we tried to get him in a bunch of little things, but you seem pretty dedicated to anything that you're doing, right? You seem like you said blue collar family, same thing here. And when you get into something, you really dive into it and you try to put all you can into it. Being that you were a bigger kid though, were you ever presented with challenges? Like you said, you had to drop some weight. What was that like for you having to drop weight?
being that size later in life, best thing that could have happened because you have that chip on your shoulder. Like I'd walk out on a mat and like people laugh or people like look at you funny, like look at this fat little kid. Oh, he's not. But like I could ball.
Nice.
So for me, like it was always kind of like chip on my shoulder. But I struggled with that through. I mean, in high school, I wrestled at like 265, 270.
Wow.
But, later in life, in my early 20s, I was almost 320 pounds.
Man. Wow. And so I got up to like 240, 245. And that I was, but I'm talking about a guy that was in his 40s, not at a young age where because I think I played so much soccer that I think that's how I stayed in shape. If I didn't play soccer, I would have been in the same spot because my brother always called me the fat kid, right? Like I was the guy that was running around the soccer field that was bigger than everybody, but I also ran people over because I didn't have to worry about them blocking me out or knocking me over. So when you wind up going to Bergen and you're on the football team and then wrestling team, I'll ask again, did you ever wind up cutting it out to just one sport or did you stay multi-sports all the way through high school?
So after my freshman year, I went through freshman football. I came into wrestling and
Yeah.
I was not in wrestling shape. So coming in, I was really kind of motivated, like, okay, like I want this spot. It's like I can't be no disrespect to football, but football shape is not wrestling shape. I was like, when wrestling season starts, I want to be in wrestling shape. So
Yeah.
it was at that point after my freshman year that I was like, just wrestling.
Well, I think we see a good reason of why you probably had some hard times bringing weight down. Liam has the same thing. A lot of pasta here. A lot of pasta in this house. I'll tell you that much right now. But that's an awesome. I think to me the just the perspective that, like I said, that you already had as a kid, kind of understanding that people were putting themselves out there to be able to get to something that was a little bit better, something like that. I mean, and maybe it was or wasn't. Your mom can yell at me if she wants to. I can totally appreciate that. But as far as the aspect of education now, because what you do, what were you into as a high school student? I mean, we can talk about kids till we're blue in the face and what they're interested in, but once you got into high school, you start to kind of mature more. You start kind of thinking about things a little bit more of like maybe what you want to do or whatever. But what were you starting to gear towards education wise as you were going through high school? Were you veering towards anything like writing or anything like that? What was your love?
Ask me what I want to be now when I grow up. I had no idea. But something that always stuck with me that I always thought about, I love music, rock and roll, for the same reasons that I love sports, in that you can do something you really, really love and totally bypass all economic and social boundaries. Right? It's like a true home run. And I always remember a story my dad told me about how the Van Halens never had a job. The only job they ever had was painting numbers on the curbs. And I always thought, like in the back of my head, I was like, man, how cool must that be? To only ever do exactly what you want to do, like what you really love. So, like in terms of school, I wasn't a bad student. Like I was like a
Sure.
B plus kind of student, but like I had to be really engaged. So I was never, I was never thinking, oh, what do I want to do for a career? Or what do I want to? So I'll speed it up
Yeah.
timeline wise. Is I went to because this kind of wraps some of these up, but
Yeah.
I went to Blooms. Well, I got recruited by a couple schools out of high school. I
Yeah.
mean, by the time I graduated high school, I won freestyle states in Jersey a couple times. I was always like the guy on the cadet teams and the junior dual teams. Like I qualified for actual regular states in New Jersey and got pinned in like 30 seconds trying a lefty arm throw. But
Oh,
I'm
really?
not sour about that either still.
Yeah.
But so like I was, I was pretty good. I wasn't, Iowa wasn't knocking on my door, but I was good enough where Division One was a possibility. So I chose Bloomsburg and I tweeted a nice story about Coach Stutz, who, if people didn't see it, I went on 4 recruiting trips, and the first one was to Division Two Newberry, and this was before like flow or video or anything. So all these schools only saw me on paper. They didn't
Mm,
even know what I looked like. They only saw my resume.
mm.
And when I got to Newberry, the guy almost said like, "Ugh, you are way fatter than we thought," and just like totally blew me off the entire weekend. Didn't talk to me. They were like, "Go do your thing. Goodbye." And I was
Wow.
like, okay,
Yeah.
And they were good. They were number one D2 team in the country. So like that kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit,
Yeah.
and I didn't like the school anyway. But so I went to Maryland, and Coach Beckerman took me around, and he was awesome, very cool, very But financially and like the size of the school, I'm out of state. I was like, I don't know, Maryland's a good fit. Then I go to Bloomsburg, and I remember Coach Stutz was like, best little man, best little big man in the country. He was like, you're the same size as Mako. He was like, we'll get this done, this, that, this is, and he was like, which I'm not. Mako is a little bigger than me, but he was really enthusiastic. He put my application through. He was always checking in on me. And for me, later in life, I appreciated that. I was like, oh, they didn't need me. Like they weren't buttering me up because I was some like blue chip recruit. It was just like a good dude. So I was
Mm.
like, okay, Bloomsburg, probably the way. So I committed to Bloomsburg and never wrestled. So at this point, people talk, I hear people talk like burnout or this, that, and the third. And I think a lot of times people don't realize, for me, it wasn't burnout. It was just like stage of my life. Like
Yeah.
it's, how many people love something when they're 12 years old and then love that same thing the same way when they're 18, 19, 20?
True.
Like people want to attribute it to burnout, but it's like maybe you're just like an adult. You have other interests you want to have. I never had a normal life. Like my life was always consumed. I was like, you know what? I was like, probably not, my thing.
Mhm.
Fine. So I go to Bloomsburg for 3 semesters, and I am getting crushed in debt. Like I don't, it's like piling
Oh,
up. I never even declared a major. I was doing good in school. I had good grades, Dean's List, was doing good in school because I was used to doing 50 things at once. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
this is a joke. Okay, cool. I'm going to come, I'll go do my school, I'll go party with my buddies. And it's funny because if you presented that in another way of a better recruit, you'd be like, this guy, scumbag, this, that, burnout. It's like I just wanted to have a normal life for a little
Right.
bit,
Yeah.
which was good for me. So I go there for 3 semesters, and I'm like, I didn't declare a major. I have no idea what I want to do. I'm getting in a ton of debt. And it's funny because everything worked out, but like leaving wasn't some type of Mark Zuckerberg. I got this brilliant idea. It was like no mas. So I come back to New Jersey. I'm living in my mom's house. Again, 320 pounds, and I'm delivering soups and salads for a restaurant in town.
Okay.
Driving a $500 beater. The light Saturn. It was a Saturn. The light dangled from the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And I'm like, what am I, 20 at the time? And
Yeah.
like, no idea what I want to do. And eventually, and this is probably like a little arrogant, but this is, I don't know, early 2010s.
Mm.
And I'm like, man, the people who do the wrestling rankings for the Star Ledger, they don't really do a very good job.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, people that were in high school were like my peers. They were like my
Yeah.
friends. So I knew
Yeah.
this, like, the traditional journalists are doing football, baseball, wrestling. They're not like, so I went and I started a Google blog spot and I called it Garden State Wrestling. And I went and I taught myself how to build this little rinky dink website.
Yeah.
And I had one really strong marketing channel was a forum on NJ.com.
Mm.
And that really so I put out some rankings and I posted it on the forum and it got like 2,000 page views the first time I ever did it.
Wow.
Which now is crazy. But then traffic on the internet was so concentrated.
Yeah.
So like at that point, I was like, okay, let's like do some more and do some more.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing this for fun while I'm delivering soups to people who don't give me tips in my beat up car. And I come across, this is as Flow Wrestling is coming up.
Oh, okay.
And I just remember thinking, I was like, this is so cool. Like they were so authentic. Like to me, is like an actual wrestler.
Right.
Traditional newspapers, it's not really authentic. It's like Big J, but they were not even little J. They were like out there and wearing headbands and like, doing crazy stuff. I was like, man, this is so cool.
Yeah.
So that kind of got me into, making videos, and
Okay.
eventually I really became interested in like live streaming stuff because I didn't know any better. I was like, you know what? This is as Twitter is becoming popular. And I remember at the New Jersey All-Star match one year, there was a row of, I didn't know any better. So there's like a press spot where the press sits.
Yeah.
And they're all sitting there and they're like, I'm going to live tweet the thing. And me, like a bozo, I take a folding table up and I put it on the corner of the mat and I put a big banner that says Garden State Wrestling. And I take my laptop out and I duct tape my phone on the backside of my laptop and I stream the entire All-Star match that year.
Oh my God.
Through this program called Ustream.
Yeah.
And again, tons of viewers, like got me like really excited about it. And I'm not making any money here doing this at all. I'm still doing whatever.
Yeah.
And for a kid at that point too, that's not very, your friends are at college, or Westfield's a wealthy town. All my peers, they're getting internships in the city. And I'm like the poor fat kid with his like beat up car doing,
meal deliveries.
So
gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah. So eventually I'm like, you know what? I was like, it would be really cool crazy in hindsight. I'm like, it'd be really cool to work for the Star Ledger. And this is, in this age of the internet, it's not easy to find people who are, right? Like now you can find anyone, find them on LinkedIn, send them a message, it takes 5 minutes.
Yep.
Could not do it back then. So like a total bozo, I show up in a full suit to the newsroom with a resume. And which if you've ever been in a newsroom, that people aren't wearing like a shirt and a tie.
Not at all.
And I basically just asked. I was like, I run this website called Garden State Wrestling. I can make videos. Like I know a lot about wrestling. And by God's good grace, they were like, okay, we'll give you $500 an hour. Come make videos for football. And then if that works, you can do wrestling. What sparked me was their writer who had covered wrestling had just retired. It was like the turn of the internet, and he'd been there for a long time. So I'm like, and it was probably insensitive. I reached out to him and was like, hey, I would really like this. And it's kind of cringy in hindsight because I was his baby.
Yeah.
But I just showed up and kind of begged my way into the gig. And I was extremely raw, right? Like I could kind of make videos,
Yeah.
but when it came for me to like actually have to write stuff, I remember they sent me to cover a high school football playoff game, and I came back and I wrote a story, and I had no idea what I was doing. They were right, like a news story. It's like the inverse triangle, right? You lead with the most important stuff. I
Yep.
just like chronologically, this is what happened. They threw my story out. They didn't even take
Oh,
it.
really?
The editor rewrote it. Yeah, it was terrible. But credit to them is they knew I had the wrestling knowledge. So they worked me through it, right? They were like, they would read my articles, and I wish we had this type of, I don't see this type of loyalty in the workplace today.
Yeah.
But they took me in. I'd go in his office and he'd read my thing, and I'd watch him edit it in real time. He'd give me stuff, read this, read that, go sit with this guy, ask him questions. But really, my thing was like, what really got me excited was eyeballs and like
Mhm.
seeing people read my stuff.
Mhm.
And even though my work wasn't very good, it got a ton of traction because I knew how to get people to read it.
Mhm.
So I'm going through this year at the Star Ledger, goes really well, all is well and good. But I'm seeing the old school journalism guys there. And I'll always remember one of the editors, an older guy, was kind of like, I picked the wrong career. This isn't a good, right? I was working at the newspaper when the newspaper closed and they turned it into just a website, like the owned company.
Wow. Yeah.
So at this point in time, I'm so delusional that I'm like, what would be really cool? I worked for the Giants. I'm like, this already worked for the newspaper, and like I have nothing to
Ah,
lose, right? I'm like,
yes.
it would be really cool. I grew up a Giants fan. I'm like, it'd be really
Yes.
cool if I worked for the Giants. So I find some guy's email, who
Mhm.
again, this is like kind of cringy and embarrassing, and I can't believe it worked.
Ah.
But I send him an email and I say, hey, I work at NJ.com, this and that. I would love to work for the Giants. And it was starting, and he actually responded, which to me was like just getting the Giants to respond to me was the coolest thing ever.
Oh, yeah.
So I go and he says, no, we're not interested right now. I say, okay. So I send him an email once a month for the next year. They start to get a little eccentric. I'm like, I'll mop the floors. I don't care. Anything you want. You don't have to pay me.
Yep.
And so eventually I go into the next year at the Star Ledger. I get a lot better at writing. I've got my National Wrestling Media Journalist of the Year trophy sitting up here from when I was like 21. And that was doing well. But eventually I hear back from, I'm trying to think of timelines here. Before my second season at the Star Ledger, the Giants get
Mhm.
back to me. And they're like, would you be interested in being a transcriptionist, someone who
Whoa.
transcribes press
Yeah.
conferences? I
Yeah.
was like, shit, yeah, I would. Say less. When, where? So I went and I showed up like a total clown, looking like I'm ready to be on the sideline with like a visor and a Giants polo, like a total goof. And I interview with this guy who used to work at the guy who I interview with is their senior writer. He used to work at the Star Ledger.
Mhm.
And, interview went really well. But at this point, I couldn't pick one or the other financially.
Yeah.
The Giants paid me $10 an hour. So I had to keep the newspaper, but they were inverse hours.
Okay.
But for me, it's like my bar for what's hard is like, again, I go to school 5 in the morning and go wrestle all day and get back at 10 at night. And like, I never thought about it that way. I was like, that's
Yeah.
just the way it is.
Yep.
So I went in that first season, I worked at the Giants. Again, they would make fun of me. I'd pull up in a different $500 beater. It was a late 80s Lincoln Mark 7 diesel. The
Nice.
anti-theft. The anti-theft on that car, you had to turn the defroster on before you turn the key over to start the car. Was the
Oh my
anti-theft.
God. That's
It
clever.
was like fading black paint. It saved me from getting carjacked covering high school football once. But
Clever.
so I go and I get into the Giants and I'm like, here's a fun story.
Yeah.
My first day there, I started as an intern.
Mhm.
So there's me and 10 other interns. And they start across the room. I'm the last one to go. They start with someone else. Kid
Mhm.
doesn't get out of his chair. He sits there and says, my name's Billy. I go to this college. My uncle knows this guy. And he kind of set the structure.
Yep.
And then everyone after that follows that because they all knew somebody,
Mhm.
right? Next one says, oh, my name's Sally. I went here. My aunt knows one of the mayors. Right?
Mhm.
And they all go. And it finally comes to me, and I'm like, well, shit, I didn't really go anywhere. And I don't know anybody. So I'm like, what do I? So I'm like, okay. I went and I stood up and I said, I'm so excited to be here. Like, I can't wait to learn from you all. This is a dream come true. Like,
Yeah.
whatever. So, which
I
ultimately I think they liked.
was
But
gonna
my
say, how was the
takeaway,
reception to that?
I think they liked it, but
Yeah.
I was just kind of, my takeaway from that though is when people talk about like equal and fair opportunities, say, sure, there are spots at the table for people like me, but it's one of them. And the other nine are for people like that. Yes, you can get in. Yes, you can do it. It's much, much harder just from that little exchange.
Mhm.
So I go through this entire season and like I took pride that I worked at the newspaper at night. They'd ask me, they were like, still at the paper? I'm like, till midnight every night. See you in the morning, 8 o'clock. Like, I didn't know how to do anything. I just wanted to be like, I'm going to work like a dog, like as
You were
hard as
whole
you want.
assing it. You weren't half assing it. That's what I like. Is you were in, you know?
Come in on my day off. They were nice. They would let me take dinner. I would go straight from East Rutherford back to the office. They'd let me grab dinner at the cafeteria, take it with me.
Wow.
So eventually, and I know I'm on a full talking at you tangent, but
Fine, dude. That's why we're here. You're good.
so I go through my second season at the Star Ledgers, my first season at the Giants.
Mm.
I win this award. People are coming up to me at events. I'm like this young kid. It was cool.
Yeah.
And I told the Giants, I was like, please, can I come back next year? I was
Yeah.
like, pretty please. And at this time, the Star Ledger as the newspaper was folding and they were reorganizing as NJ.com, just a digital
Mhm.
publication.
Mhm.
And they told me, they were like, you can't go work for the Giants again because technically the website also covers the Giants. It's conflict of interest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Giants told me, they were like, well, you can come back for another year, but you're not really supposed to. So just show up on the first day and we'll tell Mr. Mayor you're already here and what are we going to do about it? So
Holy
I'm
cow.
sitting here, I'm like, I'm going to quit my job for, which is a little bit of roll the dice, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So I quit my job at the
Yeah.
newspaper
Yeah.
and I go back for, and, you know, I would go into the Giants on my day off. I'd stay there all day. I had nothing else to do anyway. And
Mhm.
I slowly started to pick up responsibilities. I'd write
Okay.
blogs for their blog that was like totally dead that no one saw. but I wrote 2 blogs every single day, even though no one saw it. And I'd report on the data to, like, someone who's now one of my closest friends, who's their SVP of marketing, was their head of digital. He's like, yeah, you can write the dead blog that no one sees. He'd be like, hey man, look at all the traffic. Look at this. Look at that. What do you think about this? Right.
Yeah.
They'd let me work on the switchboard on their shows, screening calls, doing grunt work, mostly
Oh, yeah.
transcribing press conferences,
Yeah.
which is, the lowest position in the entire organization. It's lower than the ball boys. I'm not
Oh,
out on the field during, it's literally the most lowly, but I approached it with a lot of enthusiasm.
yeah.
So the second season's coming up. And they're like, dude, you can't go. They pay me $10 an hour, right? They were like, you can't go back again. They were like, we would love for you to. There's just not a position. People at the Giants stay there. Everyone I worked with at the Giants still works there. They're lifers. Like,
Yeah.
I could sit here and spend this entire time saying nice things about how good they were to me, how good they are to everyone, what a good organization.
Yeah.
But you can't come back.
Right.
So I say, okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
So now, like, the heat's kind of starting. I'm living on my own now in the ghetto. And I'm like, what am I going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in week like 14 or 15, the guy who was their director of digital, who I was writing the blogs for, was like, what do you think about Tampa Bay? I was like, I'm thinking, like, I want a roof over. I don't care. Send me anywhere except for like Cleveland or Washington. But
yeah.
so I'm like, Tampa, that sounds pretty cool,
Yeah.
So I go down there, I interview. I didn't want to tell the Giant. I didn't want to tell my boss I was going. I was like, I got to take a day off, but I can do all my work. I'll be here. And eventually he was like, dude, I know this guy. He was a former Giant that was now in charge of the department at the Bucks.
Yep.
So I went down there and we kind of clicked, and I got in we're now at my third $500 car I've had since beginning this rant.
Shit.
I got in another $500 car, and I told myself, I said, if this car makes it one way to Florida, I'm in. Like, just get me there.
If you make it and it doesn't start, they're stuck with you. You're staying there. Yeah.
I was like, I didn't even think about it if it doesn't start. I'm like, this is the only. This has got to.
That's what I got. Yeah.
So we get down to. I drive down all the way by myself down to Tampa, and increasing responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like we talk about, like, this is a wrestling podcast, right? We talk about wrestling, but my perception of what's difficult was always skewed. They say, like, oh, you wrestle, everything is easy, where it's cliche, right? But that was true for me. It's like my perspective of what was hard. It's like we're breaking bricks in the summer and we're playing football, running too much, and we're wrestling and we're doing, like, when I only was able to focus on one thing, easy. So we've got, Bucks doing well. I got there when we were the worst team in the league, and QB was at the podium crying. They were on the way to the number 1 draft pick. And we turned it around from the digital side through a lot of this data analysis, right? We saw that our app had a lot of engagement. We saw the types of content that our app was engaging with. And, I'm sitting there and it's slowly trickling responsibilities, right? It's like, okay, now you write articles for the site. Now you make the content calendar. By the time I was there, everyone above me had left. So I was really running the whole department for the better part of the season.
Wow.
So how do we end up back at wrestling?
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Yep.
So everyone above me had left. I'm the lowest level position above an intern. I've been there for 3 years. I'm ready for promotion, right? Like, I deserve to be promoted.
Yeah.
The Bucks now have their 3rd or 4th chief marketing officer the entire time I'm there. It was like a revolving door. I
Mhm.
told this new guy, I said, I'm ready for a promotion. He says, okay, well, we'll figure it out when we have this org restructure meeting.
Mhm.
Fine. We have this org restructure meeting, and this new guy, we have it in the auditorium of the team facility.
Mhm.
After hours, fine. This guy comes out on the stage with this little headset, like Steve Ballmer. Woo, this, that.
Oh, really?
And the point of that meeting was that there is no org chart and there is no restructure. So I leave that meeting, I walk through the team facility, out back to the football field, and called your buddy Joe Williamson. I said, they still looking over at, you know,
Yeah. 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 Okay. Okay. Over at the old FLOW. Yeah.
yep,
Okay. Ah. Thanks, Joe. Thank you, Joe.
my
So
guy.
how what were I mean, obviously being able to, because I'm gonna roll back into the Rockfin article you wrote, okay, because that kind of died. That was back in high school that memory is from, right?
Hmm.
Because I want to tie it into your writing a little bit, because reading it to me, you already were a writer, that kind of thing. So when you were kind of going through that process of going through high school athletics, and I don't mean to rewind too far, as far back as we're
No,
going, but
I totally took it off the rails.
no, you're fine, because I was gonna let it, and we're either way. I was coming back to this. So what you sat down, this article was about. It was about an eye-opening situation that you had, right? And so we don't have to discuss the entire thing, but what? So because you saw the things that you saw with addiction and things like that, and just kind of like whole kind of a mind-blowing situation for a young man. Where where did that I guess story take you? Was that kind of the thing where you were like, maybe this was too much, like as far as the sports, like, because you talked about when you were going to be done with high school, you're kind of like sports, you're like, it's not something that I really want to dedicate my life to. Did that story play a part in that?
Sure. Well, so for whoever's listening that hasn't heard, it was a story about how a buddy of mine, opiates ravaged the part of New Jersey where I'm from. And it's a
Okay.
nice part of New Jersey. They're not like people think like junkies are like, and I think now on the tail end, we see these are like good kids from better families than me,
Yeah.
right? So I'll retell it is we were sitting in my buddy's living room and his brother came in and said, you guys, his brother's like a serial criminal. He's in trouble for everything, bad guy.
Yeah.
And he comes and he says, you guys got to try this little pill.
Hmm.
And like, I wasn't like this like goody two shoe kid where I was going to be like, oh no, I'm so high and mighty. You're a kid, you want to fit in. It's not,
Right.
but I never fucked around during wrestling season. I didn't drink. I didn't go to parties. Like,
Yeah.
that was my only, when the season ends, sure. This is like right after the season, going into Fargo stuff or something. So he
Yeah.
comes, he says, you got to try these things. Takes it, he crushes it up on his yearbook, passes it around. He passes it to my buddy who's sitting right next to me, snorts this pill, which I'd never seen, see the movies or whatever.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he says, this is the best feeling I've ever felt before. And I kind of took a minute, and two of my teammates at Bergen Catholic had just won state championship.
Hmm.
And I told you about what that atmosphere is like in New
Yep.
Jersey.
Yep.
And there's no type of like, I knew better or what. My only thought in that particular moment
Hmm.
was, there is no way that can feel better than what I just saw my two buddies do, dancing on that mat and everyone going crazy.
Hmm.
Like I didn't see where it was going. I didn't have any type of, it just kind of clicked at me. And I've always kind of beaten my own drum. I was,
Hmm.
if I don't like something, I don't like something. I'm not gonna. So I heard
Yeah.
that and I was like, well, nah, I don't want the best feeling that I ever feel. I want to be a state champ. So I was like, nah, it's not for me.
Yeah,
Passed it around, and I should pull the card up. About 5 years since he died,
really.
which is yep.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I need to put a reminder. I have his birthday as a reminder on my phone. I don't have the day he died as a
I,
reminder.
I really wanted that story to be out there because there is a lot of, and it's on Rockfin. You guys, if you guys are on Rockfin, Joe does have it on there. I did want that to be told just because I think, and especially now where we see there's, especially with social media, the explosion of it and kids having so much access to it, and not just drugs itself, but just social pressure, right? Because that's to me, that's what I took away from that was you definitely were able to, again, the mindfulness of exactly what was going on. You had a different idea of what good was, right? And you obviously pushed yourself even further into that, and I think your mom actually agrees. So that's one of the things that I wanted that to be out, because I think kids misinterpret a lot of the feel goods that are out there. There's the rushes that are important, like, because they don't know those rushes yet. They haven't felt every single rush that you can feel. So they see an easy way to feel a rush and it's accessible, and they want to go to it and not work for it. Whereas you didn't have to work for that. Someone just handed it to you. You're like, this is the best feeling. And again, in a kid's frame of mind, not every kid wants to work, right? Not every kid wants to go through the hard part of getting to something, and that's the hard part for him. But I wanted that story in particular to be out there because my wife is a good friend that he was an addict, but he didn't necessarily die from the addiction, but he got into a place in life where the addiction took him to a bad place. So I think it's important that the perspective that you had at that time, especially putting the sports perspective in front of the drug perspective, thinking this is the high that I want, being out in front of that crowd, being able to win, and my friends will be around with me too because my teammates will be there, that kind of thing. I think it's important for that to be out there for kids to realize that you can look at it and be like, that's stupid. That's dumb. There's no point. I have greater things that I can accomplish along the road. I think the instant gratification generation is still alive and well because they're kids and they want to feel things right away. But I think that having that perspective, and I'll, if I can, I don't know if is that premium on Rockfin. I can't remember. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
I have 0 subscribers. If anyone wants to be my first subscriber, check me out.
Jump jump on. But because you'd mentioned, and I think I read something about it where you posted it up on Twitter. And I was like, that's interesting. I'm on Rockman. I'll go check that out. When I read that, it struck me entirely. So I appreciate you sharing that with the world in general. But go and read the whole thing, guys, because it's definitely worth a read. It's definitely worth having your kids read as well. So, all right, now we're gonna fast forward a little bit because now we're getting into the wrestling world back again, where you're talking about working at Flow Wrestling, because you mentioned Joe Williamson of Grow Wrestling. Formerly, he was part of Grow Wrestling. He started it, and then he got busy. He's doing his own thing, I think, down in Missouri. So Joe's staying busy. But you got in touch with Joe Williamson and asking about Flow Wrestling. So how did that transpire when you have a phone conversation with Joe, and how did everything roll out from that?
Well, I met Joe when I was doing the Garden State Wrestling thing. I met him at the Iron Horse Invitational at South Plainfield. I remember like it was yesterday. He asked me to do a video about Garden State Wrestling, and I was kind of like shy about it. I'm like, I wish I did because that would be so cool to have now.
Hmm.
I kept in touch with, talk about good people in wrestling, doesn't get better than that guy,
Hmm.
like
Yeah,
all the way through,
shows
right?
a shit.
So I call him, and they had a job posting up. So I called him, and I was like, hey, he would hit me up here and there asking about stuff about New Jersey. They want rights for something, whatever. So we always kept in touch.
Yeah.
And I called him. I'm surprised I'm not cross-eyed from how hard my eyes rolled at that last org meeting with the little heads. It was this tiny little thing with like a
Yeah.
little, you know what I
A
mean?
bubble on the end of it. Yeah.
It was like I can't do this anymore.
That's awesome.
So I say, you guys, I wanted a little more creative freedom. Like something that always kind of helped me is like a blissful arrogance. I can do more. I can do better. They're holding, the professional sports. I learned a ton and I met some great people and I loved my time there.
Yeah.
But there's red tape to do stuff. So, particularly Instagram, which is weird now, but it was a long time ago, is the idea of the dissemination of information happening on platform and quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone had been sharing ideas at this point in time through link posts on Facebook and Twitter primarily.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm a data person, it's like, well, 1,000 people see this article. We had this plugin called Chartbeat at the Bucks, and I could see how long and how far people got down the
Mm-hmm.
website. So I'm like, well, 1,000 people saw this article, 200 people clicked it, 75% of people don't even get past the first frame. Nobody is consuming the information that we're delivering this way.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, Instagram is the future. I want to tell stories that you can consume in 10 seconds that are just as impactful as a story that you traditionally would have to click through and read.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's harder to write in the newspaper industry. It's easy to write they call it inches in the newspaper.
Okay.
Anyone can write a story in 30 inches, tell that same story in 4 inches, 6 inches, way harder. So at the Bucks, I was thinking, well, I want to be able to deliver these messages in a consumable on platform way to the largest audience possible. It's hard to go through the hierarchy of a corporation like that to make such a drastic change. So I would present the Bucks Flow Wrestling stuff because I was such a fan. I said they do a beautiful job in layering content. They have feature documentaries, they have goofy social posts, and everything in between. It's got to be layered.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, I call Joe. He says, "Yeah, we got this job up. I interviewed with Nick Velket, who's one of the most underappreciated people in wrestling. He's the first marketing person at Flow Wrestling. He worked there for like 10 years. He's a genius and a good friend.
Mm.
And this guy, Nick Shank, who was former Houston Texans visual staff.
Oh,
so that was good for me, right? I'm coming from the NFL. He knows some people in my same circle.
Yeah.
And Nick said something to me, and I'm not going to repeat it, but he said something that was foreshadowing as to what would come on my interview. He hardly knew me.
Mm-hmm.
He basically told me, he said, we want to shatter some norms, right? We want to like be creative and we want to shatter some norms.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, sign me up, say less.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'd never been to Texas before. The first time, it's funny, the first time I ever went to Texas, I was driving the U-Haul and they had these skyways. These one lane goes over the highway.
Mm-hmm.
I drove straight through. I've been drinking coffee. I haven't been sleeping. And I hate heights. I'm terrified of heights. So I'm driving a U-Haul on this thing. It looks like I'm floating through the air.
Yeah.
First time I ever stepped foot down in Texas, I get out of the U-Haul, puke everywhere.
Oh,
I'm so upset from.
no, yeah. Oh man. So wait, were you in just in the conversations and because you already had been in wrestling for so long, when you talk about shattering norms, like what in that conversation, what type of norms were there already? I mean, you guys weren't the norm. That was you guys were as far as Flow Wrestling, those guys were it was different. Like no one before Flow Wrestling, I couldn't even go out. There were forums, of course, every state had their own forums that talked about whatever sport, but there wasn't a whole lot of media. There was the Olympics and, maybe you caught your state cover in the state tournament or something like that, but it was already kind of a shattered norm. What was the concept behind the shattering portion? Cause they're already beyond the norm already.
From the digital perspective.
Okay.
So not from wrestling industry or media. They basically, I don't know if they wanted it or that's what I gave them, But I said, I'm going to bring what I learned at the pinnacle. I spent 5 seasons in the NFL.
Mm.
I'm going to take that and just have free reign to blow up all the strategies that I didn't like, where I think things could be better. And I got there, I say Instagram, I got there, they had 10,000 followers. And the Instagram at this time was like, I post once a week, like a throwback Thursday, like it had no rhyme or reason.
Mm.
So my first thought is, well, I now understand through data analysis that the way that we're distributing information, this is where the norm got shattered.
Mm.
The way that we're distributing information isn't consumable. We had 1,000 people who could have consumed this message. We sold out for 200 link clicks, and then only 40 people actually read the article. We're wasting our time.
Yeah.
Right. So my first kind of, and I spent a lot of time just on this. If you look now, I think they're close to 1 million. I left them with well over 500,000, 600,000 in like 2 years. Right? We went from 10,000 to 600.
Wow.
But what we did, and it didn't, track wrestling had the same number of followers at that time. It was like neck and neck. But my strategy that I came in was, I need people to be able to consume these messages in one picture and 6 words. How can we make people see, feel, think about a complex topic with just those types of assets? And also volume. They were posting once a week. I started posting 20 times a day. No problem.
Wow.
And sometimes, like as it went through, like I would post like super goofy. I had this gimmick where I would post a picture of a random piece of fruit and I'd say, name this fruit.
Whatever.
Because it seems goofy, but the strategy behind that is, what the fuck are they talking about? What? And then people would comment. It was like a fun like gimmick. I'd post a banana and they'd be like, pineapple. I'd be like, ooh, close, but not close. And someone would say blueberries. And I'd be like, oh, almost.
Engagement.
Engagement. But what that also made the audience feel like is we were speaking to them and not at them, which I think is a problem in all of social media. I wanted their feed to feel like a friend. I didn't want clean, pretty graphics. I didn't want hype videos. I wanted janky, low quality assets that made me feel like I was speaking to you, not I was speaking at you. And the fruit is it's like you stop and you take a minute and you think and you're like, what's going on here? And then you come and you say something goofy and I say something goofy back. And you feel good as the user. Oh, they acknowledge me. Oh, I'm part of the joke.
Sure. That's awesome.
So, we talk about Austin DeSanto.
Yep.
Which for me, again, it all comes back to data. Everything that I ever did, I could root in data.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time we say he's leaving Drexel, I post a graphic and I say, where's he going to go? And I put a couple logos. Terrible graphic. I'm not a graphic designer. It's just like logos slapped on a picture. Yeah. Where should he go? And it got like thousands of comments. For me, I'm in this data every day and I'm like, people might be really interested here.
Yeah.
So then I go back and I post a couple goofy ones. Should he go to where, like just to like speak to the people and have fun.
Yep.
If we're not, social media and sports is an entertainment product. If I'm not having fun, you're not having fun. If none of us are having fun, we're wasting our time.
Mm-hmm. So
I post a couple, goofy graphics. We get some more, but I was able to see behind the data, like this is an opportunity. Mm-hmm. At this time, we had Big Ten matches that weren't on TV that we were broadcasting. We had him wrestling on the platform. And fortunately, through this hierarchy that existed at the time, they let me run crazy with it. Nick Velcat made with a straight face. There was a point in time where we were putting DeSanto's face in random parts of unrelated pictures and like a really translucent way.
I remember those.
Nick Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick went up with the straightest face and was like, our subliminal messaging marketing strategy. And he has like Budweiser and Pepsi and all of these, total straight face. Like, but again, it makes people be like, is that DeSanto in the back of a, right? But and now they're looking and now they're thinking very critically about everything that's being posted. Now
Yeah.
they're hanging out there and they're seeing, right, there's a means to an end. It's not just like shit posting and goofy. It's like, yeah, it is. But the strategy is I want you to think about this person.
Hmm.
There's chess and there's checkers. If you want somebody to watch a wrestling match with someone, the last thing you want to do is say, watch this person here now, checkers.
Yeah.
What you want to do is jab, 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 hook. I want to do something goofy. I want to do a matchup. I want to do a throwback thing of his match. And then I want to say, watch him. So he had such engagement on the back end
Hmm.
that there was a point in time where people watched his matches more than Jordan Burroughs, statistically. Like he was the most watched wrestler. And I think some of it is because of him and his personality. I think some of it is
Yeah.
the institutional support for some of these off color marketing strategies
Hmm.
that kind of made him like a quasi celebrity, you know?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if in knowing those posts, because I mean, I've been following Flow for quite some time, and knowing those posts, like as a general person, I'll call myself the civilian, sitting off to the side, and I'm the one scrolling through, and all of a sudden you see Austin DeSanto's head popping up in the back seat of someone's like caravan or something like that. And you're like, what the hell was that, Austin? I need to scroll back through that, and yeah, I click on that, right? Like that's like a what now? What is it saying there? Like, are they saying he's taking a ride in a minivan somewhere? Like, what's going on? Nope. Then you guys are just talking about some, hey, Austin's taking a trip over to here. He's, whatever. So it works. It works. And trust me, I'm trying to take as many notes as I can right now and paying attention to what you're saying because it actually makes, not only does it engage, but it sounds like for the person doing it, it's just as fun for the person doing it, as their job. Like it's something that you kind of talked about before. Like, I want to do something that I like, something that I want to do. And you didn't get it instantly, but man, you were working your way to get to that, and now you're there. And so some of the other, I mean, there's got to have been crazier things that happened there, because now I remember watching Joel Williamson making weird videos of him, where they're in a hotel room and they're wrestling, and some of the bits
With
that
the
they did.
Russians arm
Yes,
wrestling, that was my
yes,
favorite bit. I would pump that all the time. The drunk Russians are smoking
yes.
cigarettes trying to arm wrestle. Yep.
And then they brought wasn't Greg Warren on for some of them, because he was a Missouri guy, along with Joe, and they did some little skits and stuff like that. I can't remember what the couple of different outfits they'd put on, and they were playing characters. But so you guys were having fun. I mean, to me, I want to almost paint it out as like the Google of wrestling, right? Like you guys were having fun doing what you're doing. I mean, I'm sure there's still some structure to it, but were you guys able to just kind of, when you walked into work, were you in flip flops and shorts and yeah, see, that's what I'm
Oh
saying.
yeah.
So that things must have gotten a little crazy at times around there, just having fun in general. So that sounds like it was in the beginning, and we all know, I mean, especially if you've been in the wrestling world, that Flow Wrestling's kind of taking, some little turns here and there and doing whatever they do. But at the same point, it seems like it seemed like at that point it was a pretty free flowing type of thing. Guys were having wrestlers, like you were actually seeing wrestlers that were joining the crews and having fun doing something. It made wrestling, it seemed like, a little more accessible to people, not just sweaty dudes in singlets on a mat, grabbing each other like they say. But you guys made it more engaging. You made it more um, biteable for someone like an outside person, like my wife, for example, who knows sports but didn't know anything about wrestling, and now she knows the place that she can go to check out wrestling news and just kind of see what's going on Twitter and things like that. But when you're there and kind of going through the process of what they do, how long before, I guess, things start to kind of like change a little bit? Because I know, obviously we all know of Rockfin, and we know of Flow Wrestling, and we know that the brothers existed and things like that, that the things that happened. But when were things starting to kind of change? Was that very
Mm.
long after you were there, or was that like a year or two?
So I run a marketing business now, and I work with tons of different clients.
Yeah.
I lost tons of clients. In anything I've ever done anywhere, I lose 5 times as much as everyone else. I'm just so stupid that I keep coming back for more. So I've lost clients where I didn't do as well as I should have, which isn't very many, but sometimes the product isn't viable. Sometimes the startup runs out of money. Sometimes, right, you lose some of those.
Yeah.
What I found is sometimes if you do too good of a job, what I've seen in some places where I think I've done my best work is interorganizational subversion. You do a really, really good job, and then someone's like, "Ooh, I want that responsibility. Ooh, I like what's happening here. Oh, I want this. I want this voice." So I said the hierarchy is Nick Shank, and then Nick Belkett, and then it's myself.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Shank leaves, he goes to start his own thing. Martin's gone, Nick Belkett leaves. Those were my guys. They were my advocates who allowed me to perform freely, which resulted in these types of performances.
Yeah.
If someone came and they had a problem with it or they didn't like it, and anytime you try to disrupt anything, people aren't going to like it. Like you're going to have to, always, anytime you do something new, you need advocates in your corner to be like, that's my guy. This is working.
Mm-hmm.
I explained the fruit and the subliminal message, right? I could come and I could route it to like data and business KPIs, why we were doing this. I was just having a lot of fun doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it started to go downhill when those guys left and I no longer had those advocates and the platform started to get really big because now, and you see it, I mean, I've run some huge social accounts in
Mm-hmm.
sports. I mean,
Yep.
fan control football, I built from nothing to 150,000. When the platforms get too big, everyone wants their hand in the cookie jar.
For sure.
Everyone wants to, I want to post content this way, that way. So as it got really big, and that became, why did that become the primary messaging tool and the primary messaging channel? Because of the dissemination of information and data analysis to understand how and where people consume messages. The website is no longer the primary communication tool. The website, when I say layered content, becomes middle and high, right? It
Okay.
becomes qualitative. You're not going to the website for like a quick news tip. You're going to the website for more in-depth things that need to be fluffed out,
Right.
not something that could be explained that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when it started happening for me. And I saw a little bit of interorganizational subversion where it's like, I don't like the way this is, or maybe jealousy of like, I want to be running, I could do a better job. Oh,
Yeah.
look at how many followers I want to, which ultimately was the bitter end for me there.
So, so you had fun at Flow, but there's something else that you also put out there that wasn't too long ago. I would say maybe was it 8 years ago or so, but you started up. So we see in the news a lot where, oh man, he's gonna retire. I wish I could watch him wrestle. I wish he would continue, and he's not gonna do the Worlds or Olympics anymore. Man, I wish there was someplace he could wrestle, right? And in my mind, I always kind of thought about that too. Like, man, I wonder if there ever was something that these guys could like try their hand at once they're done either collegiately or even worlds. Some of these guys are still, in shape and they want to compete once in a while. So you decided to start up a professional wrestling type of league. Correct? What year wasn't that your baby?
So I tried the one that we're talking about
Yeah.
probably now
Yeah.
isn't me. I just helped them out. I
Ah.
did myself, and I got a data point on professional wrestling in general.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So after I left Flow, I'm like, I want to own the product. I don't want to be at the mercy of departments move around. I have a new boss. People don't. I want to bring in my own people. I was like, I don't want that anymore. I'm going to create my own business. I called it Fantasy Fight League.
Mm.
Fantasy Fight League was fantasy wrestling platform where you could go. We had different events. You pick whoever, you get points, you show up on the leaderboard, you get prizes.
Mhm.
That was cool. I myself was kind of hesitant on the legality of it. I mean, we're giving prizes. I have advisors. They say it's cool. It made me feel kind of icky.
Okay.
Gambling in general makes me feel a little icky. But I wanted
Understand.
an engagement tool, keep people involved. We didn't really give out cash. We give out like cool wrestling shoes or jackets or whatever.
Yeah.
So this goes on for a while. I tried video games with Fantasy Fight League. I'm like, all right, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to make. So I still am the only person who's ever made a wrestling video game. You could play it now on Fantasy
Holy
Fight League. It's
cow.
still up.
What's it called?
Wrestling 22 had Yanni on the cover. I signed NIL deals with a bunch of Trent Hidley, Pat Glory, Ja'Cory Teamer, Yanni, Vito. Yeah, yep. It's like Mortal Kombat. Play it on
I'm
your
gonna go.
computer. Don't play it on your phone.
I'm
It
gonna
doesn't
go look
work
that
well.
up. Yeah.
I'll give you a subscription. It's behind a paywall. But
Shit.
yeah, it's like Mortal Kombat, right? It's like a computer. So I say, okay, well, maybe not fantasy. I said, maybe I'll make video games. That would be cool. That didn't really work either, as is anything, right?
Mm.
Again, I failed 10 times for everything that works. So I go back and I'm like, okay, well, I've got this fantasy software that's already built. I was like, it'd be cool. Something that's standing in the way of professional wrestling is the charity structure that supports. Are you looking at the video game? I can see you laughing.
No, I'm looking at your mom. It's so cool. Even I could take
Yeah.
wrestlers down.
This is
That's awesome.
the plug. I know. but
Yeah.
so I'm like, okay, well, I've got this fantasy software. It's really important to me that wrestlers have, and I don't know how it's going to work, right? Hopefully, what they're doing, which I'm trying to help them. I'm a huge supporter of what they're doing.
Yeah.
A problem that wrestling faces is the top wrestlers get paid through a charity structure.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mhm.
win medals, they get RTC bonuses, they get USA Wrestling gets them bonuses.
Yeah.
They have no incentive to promote themselves. They have no incentive to wrestle anything outside of the UWW cycle. Why am I going to take a match for a couple grand that's going to hinder my chances on winning a medal, which is how I get paid and feed my family?
Sure.
All the top guys are out. They're never going to touch that. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
What wrestlers believe they should be paid, I think, is disproportionate to value.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen people come and AWL, I think it was called. Everyone got paid a lot of money. People put a lot of money into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are always surprised at the draw, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu guys, MMA guys, they build themselves up so they become a draw. So people watch, they make money.
For sure.
That's no part of wrestlers.
Nope.
So I said, okay, with Fantasy Fight League, okay, I was like, maybe we could just use random people who are good enough that a wrestling audience can watch and they seem legit. And I'll tie in fantasy into it. So you have a reason to care. And these are all up on YouTube. We did them last summer.
Okay. Okay.
And I went and we had one guy flew in from Mike Mal helped me with it. We're like cursing and having fun, right?
Yeah.
So we have some guy flying in from Buffalo, but the rest of them were just like dudes in Austin. It's like anyone who knows how to wrestle, please come.
Yeah.
We tried to put music over because it was in a gym.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found, so something that I'm finding is, and I think CWA is doing a good job getting guys that are good enough that they're a draw. We can't get the best guys. We're never going to, but they're getting really good guys. Ronnie Perry, they just got. He was in NCAA finals. That's like a draw.
Mm-hmm.
My approach was maybe I can get people who aren't a draw and I can market them into being a draw. I can layer in content in between matches to tell their story. Yeah. You can tune in and not know anything about them and you have a reason to care. You're making picks. You're learning their story.
Mhm.
Nobody cared.
Oh,
Nobody cared. Oh
oh,
man, I couldn't get 500 people to watch it for free. And I
what?
got some clout. I had a huge email list. I did it in the summer, which was probably not a good idea,
Yeah.
but
Huh.
I had an email list of 30,000 people. I was sending tons of emails, social post ads, like the whole marketing gauntlet of stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody cared.
Man.
So I think the takeaway for me after that, so now we're at three fantasy play league failures in the past
Mhm.
10 minutes. But my takeaway there is the guys need to be good enough. Like they can't just be like random people. They need to
Yeah.
have a draw. They need to be
Yep.
able to lean on their schools. They need to be from Rutgers, Iowa, Penn State, Ohio State, and we need additional marketing support from the schools to distribute to their audience. Hey, this guy, Lockhaven's doing a good job. Goody was tweeting about Greg Bolsack today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rutgers Media was tweeting. Like that's how we get it. The guys are good.
Right.
Shouldn't say
Right.
good enough. The guys are good,
They're good.
and they're being supported by where they have their largest fan base, which is associated with the school.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think it has a good chance. I mean, those guys are working hard on that. They're smart. They have a team of people working on it.
Mhm.
So ultimately, I mean, we saw a guy tweeting about how kids should stay back, which everyone was having a good time dunking on him.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But
This is
the
I talk about it a lot on here with the whole hold back with the Bassets and things like that because I've had the both Bassets on. I've had both of them on the show a while back. So I love watching those kids wrestle, right? I love it. But I don't like the fact that people are like, "Oh, he's a sophomore in high school." Well, yeah, because that just happens to be the grade he's in. Now, I think you made the comment. These kids are still stepping up and they're going and wrestling college guys. So it's not to take away from those guys at all. I think what it really is the aspect of someone saying that the only way that you're going to be able to be successful or make it is you need to be held back a year. You should be held back. You're good. You're good. There's a worst advice to ever give a kid ever because not every kid needs to be held back, right? I mean, Starachi was the whole focus of that discussion. He wasn't held back. Like
it was kind of
there's
weird.
like no validity behind anything that he even put behind it. And granted, there are people like, it doesn't bother me that he said that. Well, that's fine. But if I were a parent that was in that room and I hear this guy telling my kid that I need to hold him back because that way he'll be successful at wrestling, like, are you saying that he's no good now? You can't basically telling kids they're not any good unless they get held back. And that was just like, you got to be kidding me. This is the worst advice I've ever heard in my entire life.
Well, the core of that problem, and I understand his thought process, even though I don't agree with it.
Mhm.
Bo, for example, should skip grades because he can compete in college now.
Yeah.
And if he wants to win Olympic medals,
Mhm.
basketball, the basketball players skip grades because they have to go to college for 1 year. They want to get to the NBA sooner.
Mm.
Guys coming out of football, it's hard because of like the physical development.
Yeah.
So basketball players, if football players could, they would skip grades because they want to get to that first pro contract quicker so they can get to the second pro contract quicker.
Yeah.
The problem with wrestling is the pinnacle, both now, especially for financial opportunity and also for marketability, like your pinnacle is college.
Mhm.
So guys stay back because they're trying to position themselves to get the best college opportunity because that's where the pinnacle is.
Mhm.
So I think if we get to a point where it's world championships or Olympic titles or a professional league where the true pinnacle is post college and
Yeah.
someone like Bo is skipping grades so he can get through college quicker so he can go and compete at this level.
I agree.
But if people are making 500 grand to wrestle a season in college, I mean, I can understand the thought process of I'm going to stay back because that's my payday and that's where I'm going to get paid.
Mhm.
But that's so few and far between. And giving
Anomalies.
that advice at such a blanketed level, it's going to hurt people. Because, like I said earlier, like that messes you. Like I've seen a lot of sick savant level wrestlers and end up kind of messed up down the line.
Mhm.
And something that'll mess you up right away is you're in seventh grade, stay back again. That's a
Mhm.
big difference. Sixth and seventh grade. Now
Big
you're with
time.
the sixth graders, and
Yeah.
now all your friends are in high school,
Yep.
right? So it's like
Yeah.
that's weird for you, and like
Well, it's a social aspect that
socially,
could wreck you.
exactly.
Right.
Socially, it's like okay, now I'm on this island where I'm like all in on wrestling, and I'm 12, and it's like, well, if this doesn't work out, then like
Yeah.
not good.
How do you come back from that? And that's because don't get me wrong. It's not that we didn't ever think about, like, okay, what are the benefits of doing this with Liam, my son? What are the benefits that he's going to get from it? And I've always kind of looked at, in my perspective, the social aspect more for kids in that the school age than the sports perspective, because you may be really good at your sport, but socially, there's a lot of kids that are like, why are you doing that? Like, why, how come you're not going and doing this? Like, how come you're not going and playing, with these guys when we go do it? Because, well, I want to wrestle. Now you got kids that are like, well, that's weird. Like, why are you only doing that? So, and you know how the mind of a kid works, and it starts rolling into more weird situations and why it's even weirder and everything like that. Then it turns into making fun. And then it rolls downhill from there. So again, and I understand your argument as well. The benefits, of course, if they could predict that their son was going to be a freshman in high school and weigh 96 pounds and get crushed, like you don't know that though either. Like as a parent, you don't know that your kid's only going to. Bo's growing just fine. He's maturing very well. So to the aspect of, and I can't blame the kids because the kids don't make these choices, right? Like the kids go along for the ride. They hear the reasoning from mom and dad. Maybe they bring a coach to the side and have them talk to them about it, but the kids don't make the decision. The parents are the ones that are putting these kids in these positions. Do I think the kids have a little bit of a say? I think they have a little bit of a say, but I also know how a parent runs a house, and 9 chances out of 10, we're doing this for the better of your future. That's why we're doing this. They paint it as a benefit to the kid. The kids then tell their friends, well, I'm going to be able to do this, but those kids don't understand that. So either way, it just seems like to me, it just keeps rolling downhill socially. And then, sports wise, I don't think personally that there's really a payoff because now the NCAA is going to change, right? Like this is all going to go completely different than what it was before. And $600 maximums on NILs unless it's approved and things like that. So knowing that yeah, maybe Bo could cash in, but maybe by the time he's going to be going, yeah, they're still going to, and don't get me wrong, they're still going to have donors. These colleges aren't losing donors by any means, but they're going to have to go through different avenues to be able to make that money. Because if the school doesn't approve it, and I think it's another arbitrary outside entity that approves these deals, they can't just be like, oh, I'm going to go do this and I want to make $500,000 with this place. It all has to get approved because they're an athlete and technically going to be getting paid by the school. They're almost going to be a school employee. So the rules that go along with it are going to change. And that's, I think to me, is going to bring the perspective. Hopefully it changes the perspective a little bit more on that, because I know that hey, if I were a kid, and I think you mentioned it too, if I were a kid out in the atmosphere right now, you think I'm not going to try and grab for 500 grand? Oh yeah, I'm gonna. I'm especially if I'm Carter Starachi or someone that I'm going to be done with college pretty soon. I'd love to have a nice cushion sitting inside a bank account by the time I'm done. Pay my school off and be ready. So it's a mixed emotion for me because I can see the benefits, but a lot of times to me, it just seems like the negatives weigh down the benefits from it a lot. So I don't see it as really a good thing, but I guess it's all situational too. Everything's really situational, really. I mean, certain things work out for certain people, and like look at Spencer Lee. I mean, that kid, he was an anomaly too coming out of high school. How many freshmen like that have we seen in NCAA history being able to come out? Now he didn't get those NIL deals. He wasn't able to rake that in. It might be a little different now with the HWC, but I just think the perspective that we have with sports is not necessarily a bad one, but I think even with basketball before all this happened, I think we were trying to turn college sports too much into a lucrative business for the athlete itself. I think that they should be getting recognized, and I think if the college is genuinely making money off of their image, them showing up at a game because they play for them, sure, I think there's some compensation that should be had. But I think just throwing 500 grand at a kid and saying, "Here's a check. How about you put that into a school account that pays for their books and pays for their education, and make it so it makes sense to them, and they can be like, okay, this is what I need to make sure that I'm taking care of. It gives them a sense of responsibility. You're just throwing them a bag of money, and it's like, holy cow, these kids, they're barely even able to, like, they're 17, 18, making a decision of their lives for the next 4 or 5 years. Now you're throwing money in the mix. It's like, man, I hope these kids have some smart parents, because this could get really hairy really quick. And obviously, we found out really quick with the NIL what that did with sports in general. So, but hopefully, it's no more the Wild West.
Well, it's good for the athlete. I'm always pro athlete side.
Sure.
Like, it's good for the athletes, sure. But if college wrestling is going to turn into a fundraising rat race, well, how many rich people, like, that just doesn't seem sustainable. And
Right.
it also, I know that only a couple teams have ever won, but programs are getting slashed all the time.
Hmm.
Like, if we've got teams that are bankrolled at $20 million and teams that are actually playing by the scholarship,
Hmm.
and don't have any of that, it's not good for the game. It's good for the athletes. It's not good for the game, though. Like,
Right.
we're not on. There's a reason a salary cap exists in professional sports,
Right. Correct.
right?
It's
They
right.
don't. It would Sure, it would be great if, and I know baseball they don't, but they have the salary cap, so it's like we're competing evenly against each other.
Yeah.
And that's like strategy, how you move it around. But if you got a team that's bankrolled with $20 million competing against a team that's bankrolled by 15 grand from a bake sale, it's
Yeah.
not, you run out of town.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I keep these around about an hour and a half, because I think after a while we start to lose the kids' attention, so you know how they get a little squirrel. They start looking around and not paying attention anymore. But I am glad to have had you on. I do want to talk to you more, a little bit more once we're done here and we hang up on the folks, but I do want to talk a little bit more about, kind of things we've been talking about. Maybe we carry this on a little bit, see what we can do. If there's something that you're interested in doing and getting some more of your stuff out, and maybe just kind of making this a little more dynamic, but we'll see what happens. I think what you're doing, and I think again, the take that you are able to have with this, the perspective that you have, is very unique. And I think the way that you have been able to navigate through certain areas, professional football, just a local newspaper, to flow wrestling. I mean, in this sport that we're talking about right now, flow wrestling, at one point was the be all end all. Now we got all kinds of guys coming out doing their own thing, which is, I think flow wrestling helped create all that. I mean, obviously it was something that was way different before anybody was doing. You had track wrestling, but it was like reading articles, and once in a while you see those guys post a video up with an interview with an athlete, which was great. But then flow took it to another level, and everybody's like, I want to do that. And so now we have what we have. So
Same,
it's definitely, what's that?
same,
Yeah.
same with me. I was one of the OG bandwagoners where it's like, that's really cool. I should do that.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely a unique perspective to be able to have. And especially with your, the social media experience. And like I said, I don't know SEOs, and I don't, you're, some of the stuff that you had mentioned before, with the jargon for social media, I don't know it. I'm just an old dude that sits in a basement doing a podcast, but I love what I do. I love doing this, and that's why I do it. I always want to have the interesting take on things, and whether it's an athlete or a guy that's been an athlete into, I had football players on, and now he's got an extremely successful country band. So it's one of those things where I like the different perspectives of everybody that people can bring in. Whether or not we get 5,000 likes or views or whatever it is, it's for the love of it, is really what it is. And that's another reason, because I can tell just by the way that you comment on things that you have a genuine mind for, things that are going on, to have not only a unique perspective, but a grounded perspective, So that's why I was like, I think I need to get this guy on. So I appreciate your time. And your mom has been probably one of the most engaged people on this. She agreed with me talking about kids, but it's been
So,
fantastic having Suzanne on the background. So I appreciate it, Mom. Thank you very much. We are going to end this here. Do you have any shout outs? I've been starting to do this a little more. Do you have any shout outs or any props that people are saying hi to anybody? You said hi to your mom, so we gotta make sure we say hi again to that. But anything specifically out there you want to give a shout out to?
You know you've really made it when you're on a podcast and just see comments from your mom coming through the thing the entire time. That's
I think it's awesome.
I
I
mean,
honestly,
I know,
it's great.
number one fan.
Yeah,
But I appreciate what you're doing and I appreciate everyone in the space. Something that I love is authenticity. I don't think chasing clout or chasing engagement or chasing likes. I think that's a race to the bottom. So I appreciate people like you. I appreciate the majority of people who are delivering messages around wrestling are doing it because they love it, and I respect the hell out of that. So shout out to all of them.
appreciate it. Well, we'll end it here and see if I can find my music here, because that's the special part. But it's been another episode of the Vision Quest podcast, guys. Go check out some of our sponsors. There's Anabolic Army, there is 920 Hat Company, and then Appleton Tattoo. Anabolic Army can be found on Amazon. You can also find 920 Hat Company on Facebook, Instagram. Anabolic Armies on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. Appleton Tattoo, you can't buy those guys on Amazon. You actually got to go to those guys because they actually put stuff on your skin. So if you're in the Wisconsin area, go check them out. But again, I've been Joe. Joe, it's been awesome. So I appreciate it again. We're gonna let him go, and we're gonna let you guys go. And then until next time, I think we got one next week. So we'll see you guys later. And then I'm gonna talk to you after this. So hang out for a minute. Peace, folks.